Chase Carey, I mean, do you expect him to take over, first of all, as CEO for Rupert Murdoch?
Well, I don't want to run too far down the road of what's going to happen with executive changes, but I would say that if someone were to take over News Corp as CEO, Chase Carey is someone that investors would love to see in that role.
Why is that?
Well, he's at DirecTV. He's been, everything that News Corp has not been, in terms of things that shareholders like. So he's returned capital to shareholders. He's run a very focused company. There's been no kind of hint of nepotism, all right? So one of the issues with News Corp is this is a stock that trades at a tremendous discount to its media conglomerate peers. Is a cash flow multiple of about, 5 times, a little less than that now as the stocks come down. Peers 7 to 8 times. The reason for that discount is that you've had, many, many years of controversial acquisitions, favoring the family, not returning as much cash to shareholders as peers. I think if Chase were to take control, investors would start to think that maybe you'd see an end to some of those practices, and I think that would be good for the multiple. I'm arguing that this, for a value investor, is kind of a jiu-jitsu opportunity, a stock that's beaten down that could emerge stronger at the end of the day.
Is Chase Carey, though, a double-edged sword here? Because Chase Carey is, in fact, an insider at the company, a top lieutenant for Murdoch, a member of the board, an insider on the board. Is this real change happening, or is this just a way to kind of smooth things out as they kind of move on past this whole scandal?
I think Chase Carey, was at DirecTV from like 03 to 09. You have to confirm the dates, but he was not there when the worst of this hacking, stuff was going on. He's been at News Corp long enough to get back in the mix, but he hasn't been there so long, I think, to be tainted by all this other stuff that's damaging. So I think Chase, people would respond to that. They'd like it.
Barton, at this point, does it matter? We just got to kind of get somebody with the name Murdoch kind of out of the CEO position. Is that kind of what the street needs, everybody needs to see?
I'm reluctant to go there because, look, Rupert's made tremendous value for people over a lifetime. He's a media mogul, and he wasn't born a media mogul. He made this company. His son James has done a tremendous job in senior positions. But what I think you look at is what's the worst case? And it's hard to spin a worst case scenario that says that this stock a year or two later looks a lot lower than it does today.
Let's get more on what Murdoch's appearance means for News Corp as a company and as a stock. Joining us once again, Lazard Capital analyst Barton Crockett. He, by the way, has a buy recommendation on News Corp. Barton, good to have you still with us. So you've got a buy recommendation because the assets of this company are still very attractive, still very valuable.
Right. This is a 42 billion market, or a 40 billion or so market cap company with the stock, down. And there's a lot of things happening outside of the UK. So the UK newspapers are a single-digit % of earnings. This is a company where the bulk of earnings are driven by TV networks, where they're very successful, and where these TV networks, I think, are completely unaffected or nearly completely unaffected by what's happening overseas.
We're focusing so much, Barton, as you know, as what's happening in the UK today. What if that comes back to the United States and congressional lawmakers, find that there were things that went wrong here in the United States or with U.S. officials? Then what happens? Does it change?
Well, I love those type of questions because it tells me that people are getting emotional and not really thinking factually or thinking about the numbers. The odds.
But psychology can be very powerful.
Yeah, but psychology is transitory, right? So, I think people will worry until there's nothing to worry about. And so I think the odds that this comes back to the U.S. in a meaningful way are very remote. People have talked about the risk to their FCC licenses for their TV stations, but the precedents for losing those licenses are very small. And if they did, they'd sell the TV stations to someone else. They'd get a better multiple than they're trading at right now in the private market.
Is there something, Barton, you could hear today in the testimony from Rupert Murdoch that would change your thinking about this company?
Well, that's such a broad question. Clearly, could there be something? Maybe, but is there likely to be anything? Can I imagine anything? No.
Jon Erlichman, I know you've been following this story. You're outside News Corp's headquarters. Let me ask you, how do you think Wall Street's going to interpret the Murdoch comments today? We just heard from Barton in terms of his view. What do you think we're going to hear on that front?
Well, look, we know that for the last 2 weeks, nobody has wanted to own this stock, Carol. It's lost, close to a fifth of its value over that stretch. Another analyst at a rival firm to Barton's this morning came out and said, we're concerned about this stock's performance in the near term because of so much uncertainty. And don't forget that yesterday, a big credit rating agency, Standard & Poor's, said they might cut the credit rating on News Corp because of some of these unknowns, because of the possible legal liabilities. We don't know what they could be, but in the meantime, everybody has to try to figure out what that'll be. Of course, today, if there was some interpretation that what is said by Rupert Murdoch or James Murdoch could open the door for more shareholder lawsuits, don't forget we've already heard from about a couple in the last couple of days. Well, that certainly is the kind of thing that could frighten away investors in the near term at the very least.
Jon, hang on for a second. Barton, do you care about S&P and what they had to say yesterday? How significant is that?
It's not significant because this is a very underlevered company. Their net leverage is like, a fraction of, 1. so that they're nearly debt-free. This is a company that should have more debt. They should be buying back more stock. So no, I mean, and clearly the near-term headlines are going to be an issue. What I'm talking to is really someone who's willing to look beyond that, a year or two, a value investor. I think this is the type of emotion-driven sell-off that you have to buy into.
Barton, let me bring you back because we are talking about the media circus over in the UK. We're seeing media very interested in a media company here in the United States. Is it just a great media story in your view? And when you look at the fundamentals of this company and financially at this company, it's still a very strong, secure company.
Yeah, I do think that the press kind of uproar is way in excess of the impact on News Corp's earnings and the real financial risk. And you're right, it is a great media story. And you're right, Rupert, everyone in media loves to report on Rupert for all sorts of reasons. And, I think as an investor, you've got to put that aside and you've got to really focus on how much money is this company going to make and what does this mean for that. And it's very difficult to spin a scenario where it matters very much.
And we would talk a lot, Dom, about the valuations of the company.
That's correct. I mean, we've talked so much with a number of analysts out there, Larry Haverty over at GAMCO, a lot of other media analysts, David Bank, talking about a theoretical, we'll call it very theoretical, breakup value for this company, that there is this implied discount because of Murdoch being at the helm here. For News Corp as a business, is there a reason why it's better as a whole company and not off in pieces right now?
It's hard to say that there's a ton of synergy between newspapers in the UK, obviously a dis-synergy between newspapers in the UK and TV networks in the US and around the rest of the world. You could argue that this company could be split up and that it would be worth a lot more if it was split up. I think the reality is that that's not something that I expect to happen anytime soon, but the worse the headlines get, the worse people think, the situation is, potentially at the very top of News Corp, the more you have to focus on that, because that is the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is actually, big upside in the stock.
You've got a buy rating on this stock at 15 a share. You've got a target of 26. Is it a screaming buy in your view?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, timing is everything, right? So you have to be an investor who's willing to look out a year or two. My price target is really the end of 2012. But that's how you make money as a value investor. Is you look for the longer term and you buy when people are scared and when they're selling. There's been a lot of this talk about something we can't quantify, which is the legal risk.
Right.
The thing that's important to point out is this is not asbestos. It's not tobacco. I think that's not going to be something that's large relative to the market cap.
Good perspective.